Tell me, Zora, what should I have done to save my $50 million? Give me some of your brilliant financial advice, Janitor. I'm all ears. Billionaire CEO Thaddeus Hawthorne leaned in, his voice dripping with condescension as he tossed a stack of failed corporate reports onto the cleaning cart of Zora Beaumont. He intended the question as a cruel joke, a desperate man mocking the powerless to feel superior. He expected confused stammering, a meek apology, anything but the cold, analytical recognition in her eyes as she looked up from her mop. The silence stretched, thick with contempt, until Zora's soft voice finally cut through the stillness of the Midnight Academy hallway with an unnerving, chilling precision that instantly wiped the arrogant sneer from his face. The liquidity premium was miscalculated on page 27. Before Zora reveals the mind-blowing secret about why she's really working as a janitor, tell us in the comments right now. Where are you watching this story from? Stick around, because this billionaire joke is about to cost him everything, and the final twist proves the janitor is richer than he could ever imagine. Zora Beaumont was 28 years old, and her life was measured in silence and square footage. Her background was simple. Born and raised in a tough but close-knit neighborhood in Atlanta, she was the first in her family to graduate high school with honors, but she had chosen a path that puzzled everyone. Now, she was the night janitor for the exclusive Northwood Academy, a fortress of wealth and generational privilege tucked away in the city's affluent northern suburbs. She moved with quiet grace, her uniform spotless, pushing a heavy cart through marble halls that smelled faintly of old money and new ambition. She wasn't just working, she was observing. It was just past midnight when the doors to the headmaster's office suite burst open. Thaddeus "Thad" Hawthorne, 45, the Academy's most famous and reviled alumnus, stormed out. Thad was the CEO of Hawthorne Global, a private equity titan whose name was synonymous with ruthless acquisition. Tonight, the titan looked small and utterly defeated. He was impeccably dressed, but his tie was pulled loose, his expensive loafers scuffing the polished wood. He had just lost a $50 million investment deal, and the failure was entirely his fault, a mistake rooted in pure, blinding arrogance. He paused by the massive arched windows, running a trembling hand through his thinning hair. The security alarms would be set soon. He needed to leave, but he was paralyzed by the sight of the numbers swimming in his head. 50 million. Gone. All because he hadn't double-checked the fine print. He needed someone to blame, someone to laugh at, someone to remind himself that not everyone in the world commanded the high-stakes table he had just failed at. That's when he saw Zora, quietly mopping the ornate tile floor near the entrance to the wing. Her presence was almost invisible, a deliberate ghost in the gilded cage. Thad's eyes narrowed, a cruel, ugly smile stretching across his face. The idea that struck him was vile, but it made his dark mood momentarily lift. This woman, sweeping up the scraps of his world, surely knew nothing about the complex financial instruments that governed his life. She was the perfect, harmless target for a joke. He walked over, his shadow engulfing the reflective yellow caution sign Zora had placed. He cleared his throat loudly, making Zora pause her work and look up, her deep brown eyes calm and unreadable. He threw a stack of discarded financial reports onto her clean cart, documents detailing his $50 million blunder. Thad leaned in, his voice dripping with condescension, a sneer plastered on his face that showed his utter contempt for her position. "Excuse me, miss. Since you're the expert on cleaning up messes, maybe you can fix this one." He gestured dramatically at the reports. "Tell me, Zora, what should I have done to save my $50 million? Give me some of your brilliant financial advice, Janitor. I'm all ears." He crossed his arms, waiting for the confused stammering or the meek apology. He expected her to back away, embarrassed by the sheer absurdity of the question. He wanted to feel the fleeting superiority that came from mocking the powerless. Zora looked down at the documents, then slowly back up at the arrogant billionaire. She didn't look confused or ashamed or angry. She looked intensely focused, her expression shifting from neutral to one of cold, professional recognition. She didn't stammer. She didn't blink. Her first words were delivered in a low, measured voice that cut through the silence of the marble hall like a newly sharpened scalpel. The liquidity premium was miscalculated on page 27. The liquidity premium was miscalculated on page 27. You failed to factor in the recent Federal Reserve adjustment to the short-term lending rate, which invalidated your projected collateral valuation by 3.5%. Zora stated this not as a question, but as a chilling fact. Thad Hawthorne froze. The cruel smirk instantly wiped from his face. His jaw hung slack as he struggled to process the highly technical financial jargon that had just come from a woman who held a worn mop handle. He quickly recovered, his stunned disbelief curdling into volatile anger. What? Who told you that? You were listening at the door, weren't you? That's privileged information, Beaumont. Thad tried to rationalize the statement, unwilling to concede that a school janitor could possess the knowledge that his entire, well-paid team of Ivy League analysts had missed. He believed she had simply overheard a stray conversation or read a discarded note. It was the only acceptable explanation for his shattered ego. Zora stopped mopping and tilted her head slightly. She didn't argue or raise her voice. The error isn't based on hearsay, Mr. Hawthorne. It's visible in the structure. The debt-to-equity ratio you used was pre-recession data. Anyone with a basic understanding of market volatility post-2008 would see that. She gave him a fleeting, almost pitying look. I have a schedule to keep. She then pushed her cart past him, the simple action making him feel dismissed, humiliated, and inexplicably inferior. Thad was left standing in the silent hall, his head buzzing. The specificity of her critique was frightening. She hadn't just identified the problem. She had pinpointed the source and the mathematical reasoning. He reached for his phone, determined to call his CFO to berate him again, convinced Zora was a fluke. Before he could dial, the phone rang, the caller ID showing his chief financial officer, Marcus Kincaid. Thad answered, his voice sharp with annoyance, ready to lash out. Marcus's voice on the other end was frantic, high-pitched, and filled with panic. Thad, it's over. They hit us. The rival firm, Griffin Capital, they just executed a hostile short against us. They exploited the margin. The collateral was reassessed under the new rate, just like we feared. The entire deal is invalidated, and we just lost an additional $10 million in collateral fees. We're bleeding, Thad. Someone leaked the vulnerability. Thad felt the floor drop out from under him. The exact sequence of events, the specific mechanism of his ruin, was precisely what Zora Beaumont, the janitor, had just articulated. Thad didn't waste a second wallowing in the 24-hour period that had cost him $60 million and his last shred of dignity. The morning after the devastating confirmation, he was on the phone with his chief investigator, a shadowy private contractor named Cyrus Vance. The mandate was simple and absolute. Find everything. Every tax form, every transcript, every employment record. I don't care about privacy laws. This woman, the janitor, she knows more than my entire board. I want to know who Zora Beaumont is and why she is sweeping floors. Cyrus, a man accustomed to digging up dirt on international oligarchs, was initially skeptical of investigating a cleaning lady. But Thad's desperation was palpable, and the numbers Zora had cited were terrifyingly accurate. While Cyrus began weaving through the labyrinthine public and private databases, Zora was far from the sterile halls of Northwood. She was riding the bus back toward the south side of the city, a quiet neighborhood of worn-out brick homes and towering oaks. She looked out the window, and the city's concrete faded into a memory of scraped knees and the scent of chalk dust. As a child, Zora's family was thrilled by her academic success, but worried by her intense focus on numbers. Her grandmother often reminded her, "Humble yourself, child. That kind of sharp mind makes too much noise in this world. It'll make people fear you." Zora learned to hide her brilliance behind a shield of quiet obedience, trading complex mathematical theory for seemingly simple tasks. She remembered winning a regional math competition in high school by secretly using complex algorithms to solve a puzzle, only to pretend she had guessed the answer. It wasn't just self-preservation. It was a deep, ingrained desire to avoid the spotlight, to be underestimated. She had learned early that true power wasn't in being seen, but in having knowledge that no one else suspected you possessed. That decision, to become invisible, was the key to her current life. Later that evening, Thad sat in his penthouse office, staring at the holographic stock ticker, when Cyrus's encrypted video call came through. The investigator looked uneasy, something Thad rarely saw. "Sir, I have the full file on Zora Beaumont. It's almost nothing." Cyrus leaned into the camera. She graduated top of her class, had a few short-term, low-profile jobs, all confirmed. But after her 22nd birthday, the digital trail goes cold. No major tax filings, no college degrees registered under her current name, no large purchases, no assets, no debt. It's like she became a ghost. It's too clean. Someone, or something, deliberately erased her financial and professional footprint. The realization that Zora was a voluntary ghost, a woman of deep financial knowledge choosing obscurity, was simultaneously infuriating and intoxicating to Thad. He was convinced she wasn't just a former math whiz. She was a secret weapon. He tracked her down at the academy the very next night, cornering her near the maintenance bay, avoiding the security cameras. This time, there was no mockery, only raw desperation in his voice. "Zora, look, I'm not playing games. I'm losing the company. My board is circling. I need you." He pulled out a contract, crisp and white against her Navy uniform. "I'm offering you the senior portfolio analyst role. $600,000 a year, signing bonus, full benefits, a seat at the table. Your job is to fix the hemorrhaging. Name your price, Zora, and it's yours. This is your chance to step out of the shadows, to have the respect and power you clearly deserve." He held the pen out, expecting her immediate capitulation. After all, this was a massive, life-changing offer. Zora didn't even glance at the paper. She was meticulously polishing the brass plaque on the wall, a plaque dedicated to Thad Hawthorne himself. "Mr. Hawthorne, I appreciate the offer, but my purpose isn't to fix your company. I have a job here that gives me peace, a regular schedule, and time for the things that actually matter." She tightened the cap on the metal polish. "You're offering me a cage made of gold, but I prefer the freedom of the broom closet. My current work has dignity you clearly wouldn't understand." Her refusal was a stinging blow, worse than the previous night's financial critique. It wasn't just a rejection of the job. It was a rejection of him, his life, and his value system. Thad's face flushed scarlet. The condescending pity from Chapter 2 returned to her eyes, and it was intolerable. The feeling of being completely unmasked by a woman he had tried to humiliate ignited a fire of vengeance inside him. She was not only brilliant, but she was impossibly principled, and that made her a threat. Thad snatched the contract back, tearing it in half with a vicious, loud ripping sound. His voice dropped to a low, dangerous growl. "You think you can patronize me, Zora Beaumont? You think you can sweep up my messes and judge my life? You will work for me. You will crawl back to me. I will find a way to take away your peace and your purpose until you are so desperate for a paycheck and respect that you beg me for this job." This isn't over. The world outside of Thad's office was beginning to catch up to his internal chaos. The extreme event hit him the following afternoon when a frantic assistant rushed into his meeting with a stack of documents. His estranged wife, Celeste Hawthorne, had officially served him divorce papers, and they were publicly brutal. The documents included detailed accounts of his recent financial incompetence, his personal failings, and his callous disregard for the company, all leaked to the leading financial news outlets. His reputation, already shaky, was now in free fall, and his personal life had become a public circus. While Thad was desperately trying to limit the media damage and fight his humiliating divorce, Zora was focused on a profoundly important event. She wasn't at the academy. She was volunteering at the Hope and Resilience Community Center on the city's south side. In a small, cramped room, Zora was teaching a group of high schoolers complex concepts like compound interest and diversified investing. Her passion for finance wasn't dead. It was simply redirected. Her energy was electric, her smile genuine, and her purpose clear, empowering others. She watched a young girl, Maya, finally grasp the concept of market liquidity, and the genuine joy in her eyes brought Zora more satisfaction than any bonus check ever could. This was the piece she had mentioned to Thad. Her simple uniform and quiet life gave her the cover to execute her true passion. But even Zora's sanctuary was about to be invaded. Back in his office, Thad was obsessively going over Cyrus's investigation notes, looking for any weakness, any vulnerability in Zora's armor. Cyrus had dug deep into her family and local community records, finding nothing but sterling character. Then, Cyrus pointed to a small, stylized logo that appeared repeatedly in Zora's past, a discreet, carved symbol on an old-class ring and, strangely, referenced on the deed for the Hope and Resilience Center. "That symbol, sir," Cyrus explained over the phone, his voice tense. "I traced it. It's the emblem for an anonymous, multi-million-dollar offshore charitable entity called the Sovereign Light Foundation. It's managed by a shell company in the Cayman Islands, but the operating director uses the alias Z. Beaumont. And, sir, the donations coming from this fund, they're staggering. I think the Janitor is secretly the head of a massive charity. If you're loving this story so far, smash that like button and let us know with a fire emoji in the comments." Thad was driven by a sick, gnawing curiosity that superseded his financial panic. He drove immediately to his mother's sprawling estate, the logo of the Sovereign Light Foundation burning in his mind. He found Ophelia Hawthorne, elegant but frail, tending to her prize-winning orchids. He tossed Cyrus's printed file onto the polished oak table, pointing a shaking finger at the stylized emblem. "Mom, what is this?" "This logo. I know I've seen it. It's on the paperwork for a massive offshore foundation run by Zora Beaumont. Why does it look like Dad's old-school crest?" Ophelia's hands, usually steady, began to tremble as she reached for the file. The sight of that symbol shattered her carefully maintained composure. Her face crumpled with a pain that was decades old. "You wouldn't know, Thaddeus. You're too busy climbing over people to pay attention to your own father." She sank into a chair, the full, crushing weight of old family history settling between them. She confessed that years ago, before his death, Thad's father, a kind, idealistic teacher, had tried to launch a small community scholarship fund. He had invested a modest amount of their life savings into a venture Thad had championed. But Thad, in an early, aggressive corporate move to eliminate a competitor, had ruthlessly collapsed that venture, unintentionally wiping out his father's entire investment and crushing his dream. Ophelia said he never recovered. Meanwhile, miles away, Zora was entirely preoccupied with her mission. She was sitting in a secure, bunker-like office downtown, completely disconnected from Northwood Academy. She wasn't wearing her janitor uniform. She was dressed in a sharp, quiet business suit. With precise movements, she executed a sequence of transfers across international servers, moving a single, massive sum of money, nearly $65 million, from the Sovereign Life Foundation's primary vault. This sum was eerily close to the amount Thad had just lost. The transfer was completely untraceable through conventional means, a testament to her technical financial skill. Later that night, Cyrus, still digging, called Thad. Sir, the foundation is active. We just tracked a massive transfer out of the Caymans. The money is being routed through 3 clean organizations and is ending up in a local account. It's being used to acquire a major piece of real estate in the city's south side, an old, dilapidated community center and the surrounding block. The acquisition is currently in a state of hostile preparation. Thad stared at the phone. Zora was not just a director. She was orchestrating a massive, secretive financial play right under his nose, and it was pointed directly at the city's struggling core. The only question now was why she chose to be a phantom cleaning lady while running a foundation with $65 million. Thad, fueled by the revelation of his past sins, led him to the lowest point yet. He was desperate, paranoid, and facing a liquidity crisis that could sink Hawthorne Global by the end of the month. He had no choice but to call Damon Vance, the rival CEO who had recently shorted him. The meeting was set at a private, secluded club. Damon, sleek and predatory, offered Thad a bailout, but the terms were humiliating. Damon would take a 51% controlling interest in Hawthorne Global, effectively making Thad his well-paid puppet, stripped of his power and legacy. Thad, choking on his pride, had to agree. While Thad was selling his soul for corporate survival, Zora received a phone call, a deeply personal and unsettling event. Her elderly aunt, her last living relative in the old neighborhood, was distraught. "Zora, we got the final notice. Preston Thorne is the developer. He gave us 10 days to clear out. He's tearing down the whole block, starting with our home." The mention of Thorne, the same greedy, unscrupulous developer who specialized in displacing longtime residents, brought a rare flicker of cold rage to Zora's eyes. This was the exact type of corporate abuse her foundation was created to fight, and now it was hitting her own family. After his meeting with Damon, Thad drove to his childhood home to confront his mother about his father's dream. Ophelia, tired of his willful blindness, pulled out a stack of yellowed papers. They were original architectural sketches for the community scholarship center his father had planned. Tucked inside was a faded business card. "Your father was begging everyone for help," Ophelia whispered, her eyes full of sorrow. "Even that rat, Preston Thorne. Thorne was just a small-time associate of yours back then, but he convinced your father to sink his savings into that failed venture you destroyed." Thad felt the air go cold. The same developer, Preston Thorne, who had ruined his father decades ago, was still active, still profiting from the misery of Thad's old neighborhood. But then, Ophelia pointed to a note scribbled on the back of Thorne's card. It read, "The only true security is on the ground you own." This quote, a favorite of his father's, suddenly felt like a coded message, linking his father's tragic past to Zora's strange obsession with the Northwood Academy property. She watched a young girl, Maya, finally grasp the concept of market liquidity, and the genuine joy in her eyes brought Zora more satisfaction than any bonus check ever could. This was the peace she had mentioned to Thad. Her simple uniform and quiet life gave her the cover to execute her true passion. But even Zora's sanctuary was about to be invaded. Back in his office, Thad was obsessively going over Cyrus's investigation notes, looking for any weakness, any vulnerability in Zora's armor. Cyrus had dug deep into her family and local community records, finding nothing but sterling character. Then, Cyrus pointed to a small, stylized logo that appeared repeatedly in Zora's past, a discreet carved symbol on an old-class ring and, strangely, referenced on the deed for the Hope and Resilience Center. "That symbol, sir," Cyrus explained over the phone, his voice tense. "I traced it. It's the emblem for an anonymous, multi-million-dollar offshore charitable entity called the Sovereign Light Foundation. It's managed by a shell company in the Cayman Islands, but the operating director uses the alias Zeeth Beaumont. And, sir, the donations coming from this fund, they're staggering. I think the janitor is secretly the head of a massive charity. If you're loving this story so far, smash that like button and let us know with a fire emoji in the comments." Thad was driven by a sick, gnawing curiosity that superseded his financial panic. He drove immediately to his mother's sprawling estate, the logo of the Sovereign Light Foundation burning in his mind. He found Ophelia Hawthorne, elegant but frail, tending to her prize-winning orchids. He tossed Cyrus's printed file onto the polished oak table, pointing a shaking finger at the stylized emblem. "Mom, what is this?" "This logo. I know I've seen it. It's on the paperwork for a massive offshore foundation run by Zora Beaumont. Why does it look like Dad's old-school crest?" Ophelia's hands, usually steady, began to tremble as she reached for the file. The sight of that symbol shattered her carefully maintained composure. Her face crumpled with a pain that was decades old. "You wouldn't know, Thaddeus. You were too busy climbing over people to pay attention to your own father." She sank into a chair, the full, crushing weight of old family history settling between them. She confessed that years ago, before his death, Thad's father, a kind, idealistic teacher, had tried to launch a small community scholarship fund. He had invested a modest amount of their life savings into a venture Thad had championed. But Thad, in an early, aggressive corporate move to eliminate a competitor, had ruthlessly collapsed that venture, unintentionally wiping out his father's entire investment and crushing his dream. Ophelia said he never recovered. Meanwhile, miles away, Zora was entirely preoccupied with her mission. She was sitting in a secure, bunker-like office downtown, completely disconnected from Northwood Academy. She wasn't wearing her janitor uniform. She was dressed in a sharp, quiet business suit. With precise movements, she executed a sequence of transfers across international servers, moving a single, massive sum of money, nearly $65 million, from the Sovereign Light Foundation's primary vault. This sum was eerily close to the amount Thad had just lost. The transfer was completely untraceable through conventional means, a testament to her technical financial skill. Later that night, Cyrus, still digging, called Thad. "Sir, the foundation is active. We just tracked a massive transfer out of the Caymans. The money is being routed through 3 clean organizations and is ending up in a local account. It's being used to acquire a major piece of real estate in the city's south side, an old, dilapidated community center and a surrounding block. The acquisition is currently in a state of hostile preparation." Thad stared at the phone. Zora was not just a director. She was orchestrating a massive, secretive financial play right under his nose, and it was pointed directly at the city's struggling core. The only question now was why she chose to be a phantom cleaning lady while running a foundation with $65 million. Thad, fueled by the revelation of his past sins, led him to the lowest point yet. He was desperate, paranoid, and facing a liquidity crisis that could sink Hawthorne Global by the end of the month. He had no choice but to call Damon Vance, the rival CEO who had recently shorted him. The meeting was set at a private, secluded club. Damon, sleek and predatory, offered Thad a bailout, but the terms were humiliating. Damon would take a 51% controlling interest in Hawthorne Global, effectively making Thad his well-paid puppet, stripped of his power and legacy. Thad, choking on his pride, had to agree. While Thad was selling his soul for corporate survival, Zora received a phone call, a deeply personal and unsettling event. Her elderly aunt, her last living relative in the old neighborhood, was distraught. "Zora, we got the final notice. Preston Thorne is the developer. He gave us 10 days to clear out. He's tearing down the whole block, starting with our home." The mention of Thorne, the same greedy and scrupulous developer who specialized in displacing longtime residents, brought a rare flicker of cold rage to Zora's eyes. This was the exact type of corporate abuse her foundation was created to fight, and now it was hitting her own family. After his meeting with Damon, Thad drove to his childhood home to confront his mother about his father's dream. Ophelia, tired of his willful blindness, pulled out a stack of yellowed papers. They were original architectural sketches for the community scholarship center his father had planned. Tucked inside was a faded business card. "Your father was begging everyone for help?" Ophelia whispered, her eyes full of sorrow. "Even that rat, Preston Thorne. Thorne was just a small-time associate of yours back then, but he convinced your father to sink his savings into that failed venture you destroyed. Thad felt the air go cold. The same developer, Preston Thorne, who had ruined his father decades ago, was still active, still profiting from the misery of Thad's old neighborhood. But then, Ophelia pointed to a note scribbled on the back of Thorne's card. It read, "The only true security is on the ground you own." This quote, a favorite of his father's, suddenly felt like a coded message, linking his father's tragic past to Zora's strange obsession with a Northwood Academy property. The true extreme event occurred the second Zora reached the lot. Her old sedan sat there, illegally parked in the restricted spot, the anchor of her plan. As she walked toward it, her private cell phone, a heavily encrypted satellite device she only used for foundation business, buzzed. She answered instantly, her voice dropping the simple, soft tone of the janitor for one that was sharp, commanding, and professional. Director Beaumont, a formal, non-American voice said on the line, steeped in reverence. The final piece of leverage is secured. The legal team is in position, the community center acquisition is complete, and the regulatory filing for the corporate takeover is prepared and ready to execute. Zora opened her car door, but before she slid inside, she gave the simple, final order that sealed Thad's fate and was about to turn the entire city upside down. Initiate the full hostile action. It's time for Mr. Hawthorne to learn what true collateral damage looks like. If you're still enjoying this story, share this video with someone that needs to watch this video. Thad, clinging to the last vestiges of his corporate ego, staged a desperate press conference. He hoped this would stabilize his company and validate his alliance with Damon. Standing before a wall plastered with a Hawthorne Global logo, he announced the new investment deal, painting it as a strategic partnership that would revolutionize the market. Within minutes, the reporters, who had clearly been fed damaging information, tore his narrative apart. They cited the recent divorce leak, detailed the predatory terms of the bailout, and openly questioned his competence. The headline, delivered by a major financial columnist, was a public humiliation. Hawthorne Global, a billion-dollar puppet show. Thad walked away from the podium a broken man, the subject of global ridicule. While Thad was imploding, Zora sought grounding in a quiet moment. She visited her former high school math teacher, Mrs. Evelyn Reed, who is now living in a small retirement community. Mrs. Reed, a warm, bright-eyed woman, didn't ask Zora about her current job. She asked about her passion. They shared a simple meal and reminisced about Zora's exceptional, almost uncanny ability to dissect complex financial models in the classroom. Zora admitted to Mrs. Reed that she felt she was finally using her true talents to fight a great injustice, confirming that her janitor job was merely a disguise. The time spent with her mentor reinforced her sense of purpose and steel resolve. Thad, utterly lost, drove aimlessly until he found himself outside his mother's home. He called Ophelia, his voice trembling with a desperate plea for a personal loan or some kind of family bailout to stabilize the market. Ophelia, however, remained firm and resolute. "No, Thaddeus, I won't save you this time." Her voice was heavy with sorrow and decades of disappointment. She told him that his reckless arrogance had finally cornered him, and the only person who possessed the unique blend of intellect and moral clarity to help him was the person he had belittled and fired. "You made your bed, son. Now, go find the janitor. Only she can teach you what you destroyed." Thad hung up the phone, staring into the darkness, realizing his only chance for survival lay in crawling back to Zora. Thad found Zora at the Hope and Resilience Community Center. It was a Saturday morning, and she was surrounded by a dozen kids working on homework. The contrast between the billionaire and the janitor-turned-mentor was stark. Thad, wearing a suit that now looked less like power and more like a costume, watched Zora gently explain the concept of leverage to a skeptical teenager. This time, Thad didn't demand or threaten. He waited patiently until the kids dispersed. It was a profound shift in behavior for the notoriously impatient CEO. When Zora approached him, her face was devoid of triumph, showing only calm inquiry. Thad broke down. He confessed his arrogance, his casual racism, and the crippling extent of his financial peril. He didn't ask for a job. He begged for help. "Zora, I was a monster. I made a cruel joke at your expense, and now everything I built is collapsing. I need you to show me how to save what's left, but more importantly, I need you to show me how to stop being the kind of person who makes those jokes." Zora, taking a moment to breathe, observed a young boy struggling to connect a dusty, outdated laptop to the wall. She silently helped him troubleshoot the machine, her hands moving with practiced, careful efficiency. She looked at Thad and then back at the struggling computer. Her underlying commitment was clearly not to corporate salvage, but to community repair. She understood his desperation, but she also knew desperation wasn't enough. She finally turned to Thad. "I will help you, Mr. Hawthorne. I know exactly how to dismantle Damon's attack, but my help comes with a price that has nothing to do with money." Zora's voice was low and firm. "You must publicly, fully confess the truth about your early negligence, the failure that ruined your father's original community project, and the systemic greed that you built your career on. No spin, no PR. The whole, ugly truth. You must confess your sins, or I walk away right now." Zora's condition wasn't a negotiation, it was an exorcism. She led Thad not back to his penthouse, but to the community center's small library. There, on a plain wooden table, she opened a thick, worn binder. Inside were dozens of names, photographs, and detailed case summaries of families, small businesses, and community projects that had been collateral damage in Thad's rise to power. She forced Thad to look through it, showing him the devastating ripple effect of his early, unchecked ambition. It was a visual catalog of his corporate ruin, revealing a destructive pattern he had never acknowledged. While Thad was silently absorbing the devastation he had wrought, Zora allowed herself a brief, personal flashback. She remembered her college year at a prestigious, anonymous finance program where she excelled, but felt increasingly isolated. She remembered the pressure to monetize her genius and the overwhelming feeling of disgust with the very industry she was mastering. She left the program when her grandmother fell ill, prioritizing family over a career that felt toxic. She realized then that her knowledge was a weapon, and she needed to wield it from the outside for the people she cared about. The tension broke with the devastating truth Zora had been waiting to deliver. She leaned across the table, her eyes filled with cold, controlled fire. "You want to know why I know you? Why I'm here?" Thad nodded silently, humbled. Zora confirmed the family connection. Her grandmother, the matriarch who taught Zora humility, had been Thad's father's longtime secretary. "Your reckless decision didn't just ruin his scholarship dream, Mr. Hawthorne. It wiped out my grandmother's entire retirement savings. That failure, that single act of greedy negligence you perpetrated, forced me to drop out of the only place I belonged." Zora revealed the full extent of her vow. She had spent years quietly and methodically building the Sovereign Life Foundation, not as a replacement for her career, but as a deliberate financial countermeasure, a tool for peaceful, financial revenge against men like him. She had hidden as a janitor at his alma mater, waiting for the perfect opportunity to strike back at the systemic cruelty he represented. The janitor uniform was not a sign of failure, but the perfect camouflage for her long-game revenge. The action began immediately. Zora, now sitting in Thad's vast conference room, took charge. She didn't use a whiteboard. She used a single sheet of paper and a pen, drawing a simple, terrifying flowchart of Damon's corporate structure. She unveiled a complex, audacious plan to dismantle Damon's power. It wasn't about simply saving Thad. It was about exposing Damon's predatory loans, illegal market manipulation, and the network of shell companies that allowed him to prey on vulnerable companies. The execution would be surgical and public, destroying the man who was bleeding Thad dry. In a strange interlude, Zora left the high-stakes planning room to go shopping. But she wasn't buying a new suit or a luxury car. She returned to the supply store and purchased new, high-tech, quiet janitorial supplies, a specialized vacuum and mop system. Thad watched in bewildered silence as she organized the tools on her new private maintenance cart. She explained simply, "I may not be on the payroll, but my work here isn't finished. I like things clean, Mr. Hawthorne." She was subtly telling him that her true purpose, her commitment to order and maintenance, transcended her employment status and his pathetic corporate drama. The final extreme event of the day was a legal shockwave. Zora utilized the forgotten restrictive covenant she had discovered in the archives, Chapter 8. She, as the newly designated director of the Sovereign Life Foundation and the legal holder of the covenant's rights, filed a temporary restraining order against the Northwood Academy Board. The order prevented them from selling or developing Lot 4B, the restricted parking lot, to Preston Thorne. The legal bomb stopped Thorne and the board dead in their tracks, effectively using her janitor-level knowledge to thwart a multi-million-dollar land grab that was directly linked to the man who ruined her family. Thad watched, slack-jawed, as Zora used a tiny piece of forgotten school bureaucracy to wield immense power. The culmination of Zora's financial attack was an undeniable corporate victory. Her plan was executed flawlessly over 24 hours. Regulatory bodies, armed with the evidence Zora provided, moved swiftly. Damon was exposed as a corporate predator, and his company's stock plummeted, forcing him into massive asset liquidation. Thad was saved from absolute ruin, but the cost was steep. He was forced to give up his controlling interest in Hawthorne Global, effectively dethroning himself. He was humbled and alive, but no longer Titan. In the quiet aftermath, a genuine moment of respect developed. Thad found Zora sitting alone on a park bench. He didn't discuss business. He spoke about his father and the guilt that had plagued him. He finally asked Zora the question that had been burning him alive. Why? Why the foundation? Why the secret wealth? You could be running Wall Street. Zora looked out at the city skyline, at the gleaming towers representing the life she rejected. The revelation of her true motivation was delivered with quiet conviction. The foundation is my revenge, Thad. Not against you personally, but against the system you represent. It was built from shrewd, silent investments and designed to counter corporate exploitation. She explained that every dollar she made was used to rebuild the communities and lives that men like him and Damon carelessly destroyed. I'm a financial mercenary, and I only fight for the powerless. And I came to Northwood to clean up more than just the floors. I came to clean up the debt of your past. The fact that a janitor was secretly a financial powerhouse directing a multi-million-dollar counter-economy was the final, stunning truth. If you're loving this story so far, don't forget to smash that subscribe button so you don't miss the next story. The corporate collapse created a financial vacuum, and Thad's estranged wife, Celeste, saw it as her final, ruthless opportunity. Celeste's lawyer threatened to publicly expose Thad's full tax history and every unsavory detail of his past deals unless he agreed to an exorbitant divorce settlement. She was leveraging the chaos, convinced her ex-husband was too defeated to fight back. Zora intervened, but not with a corporate strategy. She took Thad to the Hope and Resilience Center's yard, where she was organizing a cleanup project with the local students. She wasn't talking about billions. She was talking about litter. Zora, wearing old jeans and work gloves, taught Thad how to properly dispose of rusted metal and broken glass. She showed him the quiet dignity in selfless labor and the immediate, tangible reward of restoring something broken. Thad, initially clumsy and awkward, soon found a strange satisfaction in the work, realizing the value of cleaning up messes that weren't measured in market capitalization. The extreme response to Celeste's demand came swiftly. Zora, using the Sovereign Life Foundation's vast network, had been quietly investigating Celeste's accounts. She had found a hidden network of offshore trusts Celeste used to shelter assets from Thad during their marriage. And those trusts involved ethically dubious investments. Zora confronted Celeste's lawyer, not with threats, but with irrefutable, detailed evidence of Celeste's own unethical financial dealings. The lawyer immediately backed down. Zora had used her financial acumen to force a swift, quiet, and equitable settlement, saving Thad from further public humiliation and proving that her expertise could protect, not just destroy. The school board was furious. The legal roadblock Zora placed on the restricted Lot 4B forced them into an emergency meeting. The board, consisting of several powerful Northwood Academy alumni and donors, accused Zora of malicious intent, property interference, and exploiting a legal loophole. They demanded she lift the temporary restraining order immediately. The principal, Mr. Reynolds, looked miserable, caught between the wrath of the board and the quiet strength of the fired janitor. In a powerful show of support, a crowd of students from the Hope and Resilience Center arrived, carrying a handwritten petition. They spoke passionately about Zora, praising her for teaching them math, financial literacy, and self-respect, contrasting her positive impact with the board's single-minded pursuit of profit. The emotional testimony visibly shook several junior board members, showing the undeniable, quiet influence Zora had built in the real community, away from the gilded halls. When Zora finally stepped up to speak, the truth about her actions was revealed. She didn't defend herself. She simply presented the original restrictive covenant document. She read the forgotten clause aloud. The land was legally set aside by an anonymous donor for an educational initiative dedicated to the marginalized community. She looked directly at the oldest board member. This land was not for sale then, and it is not for sale now. Zora then announced her current role as the director of the Sovereign Life Foundation. She stated that as the entity representing the intent of the original anonymous donor, she was not dropping the lawsuit. She was fighting to ensure the land served its intended purpose, not the board's balance sheet. The air in the boardroom was thick with shock. An old, retired attorney on the board, startled by the documentation, slowly pieced together the history. He remembered the original donor as a modest, idealistic man who had used the last of his family's money to set aside the land before dying suddenly. The attorney confirmed the donor's identity to the stunned room. It was Elias Hawthorne, Thad's late father. Thad, sitting silently in the back, realized his father, whose dreams he had destroyed, had secretly managed to salvage one final legacy, a small piece of land for the community. Thad, now completely humbled and emotionally broken by the guilt and realization, stood up. He announced his immediate and permanent severance from Hawthorne Global, confirming his shift towards social entrepreneurship. He pledged the remaining value of his shares to create a new, ethically driven investment fund dedicated to supporting minority-owned small businesses, managed by a team with Zora's ethical standards. It was the public confession and atonement Zora had demanded. The board, recognizing Zora's moral and legal leverage, abruptly changed course. He offered Zora a huge monetary settlement, a 9-figure check, to drop the lawsuit and go away quietly. The goal was to eliminate the controversy and maintain their prestige. Zora looked at the check with the same bored disinterest she once showed his job offer. She pushed the check back across the table. I didn't come here for money. I came here for justice. I'm keeping the land, and I'm keeping the covenant. I want the purpose fulfilled. The janitorial supervisor, a grumpy man named Mr. Henderson, found Zora packing the few boxes she had left at the community center. He was completely baffled and voiced the question everyone, the board, Thad, and the audience, was still asking. Why, Ms. Beaumont, you're a multimillionaire director of a foundation. Why were you here cleaning toilets and scrubbing floors for the last year? You had the money to buy this entire school. Zora gave him a look of deep, clear understanding. I needed to be invisible, Mr. Henderson. I needed to see the structure of power from the very bottom, where they never look. And I needed to stay grounded. Cleaning reminds me of my purpose, to maintain order and clean up messes, whether they are on the marble floor or in the stock market. She explained that the janitor uniform was her ultimate camouflage, allowing her to observe, plan, and execute her mission without attracting the attention of people like Thad or Thorn. She was the ghost of her own revenge. Zora told Henderson her work at Northwood Academy was finally done. She drove back to the academy one last time, parking her battered sedan precisely on Lot 4B. She emerged from her car, not in a uniform, but in a custom-tailored, immaculate black suit, wearing the Sovereign Light Foundation crest as a pin. She looked at her reflection in the highly polished academy windows. The janitor was gone, replaced by the director. She pulled out a set of keys, not for the maintenance closet, but for a massive commercial delivery truck that was now idling discreetly down the street. She was ready for the morning. Thad and the humbled Principal Reynolds arrived at the Northwood Academy campus early. A local news crew, completely unexpected by them, was already filming in the restricted Lot 4B. The camera lights glared on the shiny delivery truck, now pulling into the lot. Zora, dressed in her power suit, stepped out of her car, her illegally parked car, and walked to the center of the lot, holding a microphone. The twist was delivered with poise and power. Zora addressed the principal and Thad directly, speaking to the live camera. "I was fired yesterday for parking in this restricted lot, but I didn't come to argue for my job or file an appeal." She gestured her car. "My presence here, specifically on this restricted land, was the only way to legally maintain the covenant created by Elias Hawthorne. My car was merely the physical anchor." She then turned and pointed to the massive truck. "I am the director of the Sovereign Light Foundation. I came to the academy today, not as a janitor, but as the primary donor." The truck's doors rolled up, revealing dozens of gleaming, brand-new computer workstations and boxes of supplies. "These are dedicated to the students of this academy and the Hope and Resilience Center." Furthermore, Zora announced, holding up an official plaque, "In honor of a man who believed in dignity over profit, I am establishing the permanent, fully endowed Hawthorne Beaumont Scholarship Fund for underprivileged students." Thad, standing beside a speechless principal, looked at Zora. His eyes were not filled with humiliation or anger, but with genuine respect and overwhelming gratitude for the redemption she had forced upon him. Zora had taken his family name, a name he had nearly ruined, and attached it to a legacy of justice and kindness. Poetic, empowering ending. Zora looked directly into the camera, her final words aimed at the audience. "I came to Northwood Academy to clean up messes. I found out that true wealth isn't measured in dollars, but in dignity, and that the biggest messes are rarely found on the floor." She walked away from the camera, leaving the stunned board, the press, and the humbled billionaire behind, the janitor uniform now nothing more than a powerful memory. Don't let the next powerful truth pass you by. If you believe in second chances and fighting for what's right, hit the like button now. If you're still not subscribing, drop a comment. What's holding you back? Only subscribers get the full story. Don't be left behind.